Okay, the stream should be switched, and they'll tell us in the chat box soon, I hope. Here's the agenda. Shared in the chat. Welcome, Vitalik. Can you please mute? Oh, you're actually, you're pretty, we couldn't hear you very well. Can you test that one more time?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, cool. Okay, great. The stream is transferred over. Let's get started. So we have a number of things in the agenda today. And as we have the past few weeks, we're going to start with testing updates. Diederik has been spending a lot of time restructuring, getting everything really clean, and working on some tests. Diederik, do you want to give us an update?
Right. So for testing, the primary idea now was to get the tests integrated into the specs repository so we could trigger them with CI. We want the PySpec to be this common core between the tests that do the sanity test for the spec itself, the test generators, and in the future we will also have invariance testing. So you know a certain output is valid. And together with some new tooling, we get to write new test generators. We have an example state transition test generator now for deposits. We have lots of SSE testing. And there's a few others that are backported to the new tooling.
Cool. Hey, Greg, can you mute, please?
Sorry.
No problem. Thanks, Proto. So there's increasing number of tests and good examples on how to use the new test generator functionality. If you want to get your hands dirty and write some tests, I recommend opening it up. Cool. Next, we will go to client updates. Let's start with Pegasus.
Hey, can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, so we're pretty close to being up to date with the 0.5.1 spec. We've been doing a bunch of network debugging. We integrated Antoine's implementation of the plum tree algorithm, and we're also planning that road dinner op workshop. So if y'all are going to be in New York during blockchain week, I think it's like the 15th or 16th. Maybe someone can jump in if they remember the exact date.
It's the 16th.
And then it's the 16th. Okay, right on. And then we're also working on generating some test data for deposit contract input and output. So that's pretty much it.
Cool. Have you had your attempted to run any of those state transition tests?
No.
Cool. Just curious. Thanks. How about parity?
So for us, for the last week, we are mostly working on the Marco database implementation, trying to implement the generate Marco index, so we can just store everything into a local database. And yeah, that's basically for us.
Great. Thank you. How about Lodestar?
Hey. Yeah, so we're doing a couple things. We've got a branch tracking v6 because we thought it was going live last week. So we just have that continue updating. And we pretty much wired up everything, and we're getting ready to actually test like a single node kind of block processing some empty blocks. And we're getting ready to integrate a couple of different, we've got libp2p actually on its way pretty well, and we're working on hobbits as well. So we can get closer to testing syncing up with Artemis and whoever else wants to join. And and we have a like POC/MVP of our validator client. It's like stateless at this point, but it looks like it should be working soon.
Cool.
That's about it.
Thank you. How about Nimbus?
Hey, so in the past 3 weeks, we had our testnet launch at the beginning of the month. We targeted crypto enthusiasts, and we had good feedback for the first 2 weeks. It was relatively easy to get started. This week we had a couple issues due to firewall changes, but that's fixed since this morning. And we had a lot of interest from Korea, even though we didn't do anything particular there. That raised a lot of issues and improvements on error messages, logs. We found some memory leaks, and we did some optimization on state transition because they were much too slow. And right now we have 2 testnets running in parallel, one for the public called testnet 0, and one for development that we will use for 0.6 or any development when we don't want to break the testnet for the public. Otherwise, our beacon chain is now working on Windows. We didn't work much on Windows testing because we had some issues in the past, but now it's working. But we don't advertise yet because the build system is a bit complex. Regarding networking, we had some discovery issues that we fixed. We improved sync efficiency. So right now we have both backward sync, like a client request missing blocks, and we also have forward sync. So someone requests blocks, and the replier will send the block requested, and every following blocks both have merits. So we are waiting, trying to check if we should keep both or use one or the other. We had issues with NAT traversals for the testnet, so we wrapped a mini UPnP and NAT PMP, so it's being integrated into Ethereum 1, and we will be doing the same for the beacon chain soon. And we added some debugging tools and leak detection tools for the networking part, and also a tool to query network topology, because most of the issues we had with the testnet was pure discovery and networking. And a side note on Ethereum 1, we've been working on Whisper a bit. And regarding testing, so we can now pass the state tests, though we don't pass them. And we opened 2 issues on the test repo on improvements that we would like to see. And we are eagerly waiting for the SSZ tests because hashing is needed to pass the state tests, and that's where we are failing. That's it.
Got it. Thank you. How about Harmony?
Yep. So we are now up to date with 5.01 spec. We adopted almost all tests and passing them, except of a bunch of state transition tests. We implemented incremental tree hashing. We're now doing some benchmarking tool to check what parts of the spec helpers and
Did you bring that back, Glenn, or did you?
Greg, can you mute, please?
Yeah. So also started via API implementation and client syncing functionality. That's it.
Great, thank you. Can you share your incremental tree hashing implementation? I know Paul from Lighthouse has been working on that a lot, and it'd be good to share ideas there.
Yeah, sure.
Cool, thank you. Great. How about Trinity?
Oh, hello. So the last week, most of us were in ETCA last 2 weeks, so still feel in Australia. Respect for the people who in Australia, really. And the testnet is under construction, and now we are testing how to proposing the blocks between the validators. And another thing is that we are integrating the common test Eth2.0 test version 0.5.1 to the Trinity client side. That's our updates. Thank you.
Thank you. How about Lighthouse?
Yep, so we are now passing 5.1 state transition tests. Paul's implemented the tree hash caching in isolation. I think next week we'll probably be implementing into our runtime. We've been assisting with the BLS standardization by benchmarking a new hash to curve method. We've been improving networking and doing some bug fixes like everyone else, particularly in discovery, and started doing some peer management for Lighthouse. And we're improving our logging and figuring out, started building some debugging tools to do some proper large-scale network tests. That's it from us.
Great, thank you. How about Prismatic?
Yeah, hey guys. As many of you seen from our Grafana dashboard, most of our resources are going to improving and fixing runtime bugs. So we're making incremental steps. Right now, the current update is we're able to run 128 validators with post-chain restart with testing some force scenario, and 128 validators work. So we're trying to ramp up to 1024 validators. We ran into a few issues where we're trying to figure out what type of bad blocks we should save, what type of fork block we should be saving, and I will ask them later so we don't spam this status update. On top of that, we are optimizing LMD for choice. We add caching to committee shufflings, and we implemented where a single validator can act as multiple validators by giving them many different public and private keys. And shout out to our team member Shay for that. And that's it.
Cool, thank you. Any updates from Geth? I think Felix is the only one from Geth today.
Yeah, so I can just say that basically there is some work on Eth2 stuff in the Geth team. It's mostly me working on the discovery, and then we have one guy just like exploring different parts of Eth2 and like trying to implement some stuff, but we're not at a point where we can actually like follow the spec or anything. So I guess like at that point, someone who's actually working on that stuff is going to join the call.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I see Martin's been digging in. He's found a few bugs here and there. So.
Yeah, it's mostly. I think most people are actually really busy. So on the Geth side, we're just really busy with like ETH1 and like the next big release, which is gonna happen real soon. And like there's like a ton of stuff on the Geth side that's not related to Eth2.0. So we're just not. We just.
Yeah, I hear you. Cool.
Especially like we made a promise to like like maybe spending like half a day each week like working on Eth2 stuff, but in practice just never happens.
Word. Okay, thanks. And we'll get some network updates in a little bit. I think Yeeth, I don't think we have anyone from Yeeth. Is that correct? Cool. Okay, thank you. So we had a workshop in Sydney. Thank you everyone that was able to attend, and thank you Sigma Prime guys for helping us find a location and the just general hospitality and helping out there. I wanted to give a little bit of time for brief updates. The expectation, I think, is to write up some notes from each of these sessions, and we also have some videos of most of the sessions that I'm hoping to get soon and release. But if anyone that was leading in a session that wants to give just a quick brief on what happened, again, quick, but have at it. Paul, do you want to give us an update on your session?
Yeah, sure. So mine was client architecture. So we spent the first part sort of talking about, I think it was, I don't have the notes in front of me, but it was APIs. So talking about like trying to define maybe some minimal interface between a beacon node and a validator client and what that's like. We chatted a little bit about whether we should use JSON or gRPC. I think Luke from Sigma Prime is going to create some issues to deal with that. And then we just kind of had a bit of open discussion about caching and optimizations and things like this. So yeah, not a huge amount of takeaways, but once I have those issues, I'll link them in.
Cool.
It was mostly just us kind of trying to like learn from each other.
Cool. Thank you. Matt, do you want to give us an update on the network side? Or not an update,
Yeah,
just a
everybody hear
briefing?
me?
Yeah, cool. Yep.
Cool, 1 sec. Let me just pull up the notes. Awesome. So we covered a variety of things. The first thing that we covered was libp2p issues and things that we might like to change regarding libp2p. So I have a big list of those things, and we might go over those later during this call. Otherwise, I'll sort of aggregate them and we can discuss them offline. We discussed briefly some problems with serialization, which I will be writing up spec changes for in order to support, and potentially also discussing with some of the SSE team in just a few minutes. Regarding propagation, so one of the big things we walked away from was that we're going to resurrect some of the efforts that Whiteblock was doing in order to test how Gossip Sub performs under load. So I'm really looking forward to that, since that's sort of the biggest blocker right now to full adoption of Gossip Sub. But nevertheless, I'll be creating the specification for what we are going to be Gossip Subbing over the next couple of days. Let me check. And then finally, for peer discovery, it's still a pretty early discussion there. But the main thing that sort of we came together as a group was that we need to just spend some time to talk to Felix or some other expert on Discovery v5 to understand how it needs to change as it relates to ETH2. So Felix, like if you have a chance in the next like week or two, just to have a quick call with me to go over those things, I'd really appreciate it.
Oh, sure, yeah, absolutely.
Cool, yeah, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. Great, thank you. And then the other morning session was WASM. There was a lot there. Does anybody want to give us just a brief update on that?
I can give an update. The session started with a reminder of the goal of EVM at the start and WASM. So for WASM, it was more like a Java for the web, something built for the web from the very start, compact with security property and close to native performance. And EWASM the goal is to abstract the execution layer. So the two main challenges for EWASM that I noted was muttering and bounding execution. So we had a very long review by Kazi on EWASM performance and some special cases also where the EVM was actually faster than EWASM. We talked a lot about WASI, which is Mozilla WebAssembly System Interface, and comparing it to the Ethereum environment interface. And some questions about does it fit with the Ethereum or not? Should we use it or not? And another part of the talk was about the ease of formal verification with an intervention from the people from KEVM, who highlighted that WASM has a lot of nice properties for provers. And another thing was about interoperability with other chains, like should EWASM be proposed as a concerted effort with other blockchain, and what happened with metering, or is it beneficial? So lots of questions about should we do it like in both for WASI or EWASM? Should we do it on our side, or should we talk to others with potential risk of delaying the delivery of phase 2? Another talk about precompiles, and I guess that's it. Yeah, I think that's the gist of
Cool.
the talk.
Thank you very much. Cool. So those are the morning sessions. Then after lunch, Vitalik led a whiteboard session on light clients, which was awesome. Just pretty much going over the specs, the rationale, and the design there. There is a video, and we will be sharing, so I don't think we really need to go over that right now. In the afternoon, we had a session on just testnets, roadmap, kind of, we ended up just talking about lots of things that need to happen and generally trying to figure out what needs to happen in Q2, Q3, etc. Few notes I have were some conditions necessary for having a long-standing multi-client testnet where all clients pass tests, consensus tests, speaking same networking protocol, building out networking monitoring output tools. We're definitely interested in doing some sort of structured testnets, maybe similar to the type of game of stake stuff seen on Cosmos. So we're looking into organizing that and maybe what some of the goals there would be. Obviously, some let's see, general tooling on visualizers, block explorers, some functions for injecting bad data into the testnets, and then stuff we expect in Q2 be a phase 0 spec freeze, enhanced testing, and testing against the Pi and Go spec for conformance between them, defining a minimal validator API, standardizing events and log formats, standardizing canonical IDs for objects like the root or the signed root. Q3, audits and formal verification, longer standing testnets, Hive-like CI, and working towards a longer standing multi-client testnet. And then beyond that, figuring out the path towards launch. Cool. And I'll type up those notes in a little bit more formal way to share. And the other afternoon session was just phase 2 outside of the VM. I believe this ended up being, I wasn't a part of it, but I ended up being kind of like a whiteboard session that Vitalik led. Vitalik, do you have any notes or comments on what happened during that event?
Yeah, and we basically went through the kind of different parts of what we expect to be phase 2. So WebAssembly, cross-shard communication, rent, state, Merkle proofs, like abstraction, and like I guess it seems that that all of the kind of big parts of phase 2 are kind of roughly figured out, at least in their general form. And I got the impression that people seemed kind of fine with it, but then there's obviously a whole bunch of small details still to be figured out. Like the things I went through are basically the same as the posts that I made, I think, one time on the in the Eth2.0 specs issues and the other time in the Magicians.
Cool. Thanks. And so we do have videos of all of these sessions except for the client architecture because we only had 2 recording setups because of the way the space was set up. And so I will get those out as soon as possible and some accompanying notes. Again, thanks everyone that could make it, and thanks Sigma Prime for doing some of the hard work getting us the space and stuff. Cool. Next up on the agenda is research updates. Are there any research updates?
So it looks like the research team has more or less rough consensus on trying to do a spec freeze on the 30th of June, which is basically the end of Q2. I think we're very much on target and it's doable. in the last like 2-3 weeks, there's been lots of simplifications, and there's still a few simplifications in the pipeline regarding deposits, incentivization, cross-links, serialization abstraction, zero values for SSD objects, and various other stuff. We've also got the BLS standardization kind of moving forward now. So we have fortnightly calls. Initially with Algorand, but now we have Ethereum people, Algorand, Chia, also Ledger, the manufacturer of the Nano S. So quite a bit of engagement there. We also are looking into constant time hash functions for hash G2. And in addition to the traditional method, which is called the Fuq-Tibuchi, apparently there's a new curve that's just came out by Dan Bonnet and Riyad Wabi. So I guess we'll be discussing that. One thing that I think there's rough consensus around is moving transfers to phase 1. So no transfers in phase 0. I guess part of the rationale there is to take a slow and steady approach. Like transfers would be the main kind of economically meaningful type of action on phase 0. So if we remove them, we are kind of signaling that it's more of a test net. And if there is some sort of network disruption, then we can do large rollbacks without having to worry about these transfers. And it will also hopefully allow us to ship phase 0 earlier. And on that note, in terms of trying to ship phase 0 early, we may postpone the Randall early reveals for phase 1 as well, and also partly because they're kind of bundled with the custody key reveals, which are also phase 1. One thing that I've started working on locally is invariance. So trying to find, to start with, invariance in the state, so static state invariance. And the idea there is to try and run the invariance check for every test that we do, including fuzz testing. So kind of a new perspective on the spec, which is interesting. And I guess thinking further down the line for phase 2, and that's kind of one of the outcomes of the workshop, and is kind of transaction abstraction. So the idea that in EVM 2.0, we may not have a notion of transaction where basically everything is just a contract and a contract call, which is an idea that seems to be quite nice and powerful with a few downsides.
Cool.
Yeah, so on that topic, I've been recently starting to think about how to do like fast cross-shard transactions. Basically, the approach that I've been kind of promoting so far is this big strategy of this layer 2 thing where you basically you can include receipts in from one shard into another shard before the second shard kind of formally learns about the receipt from the first shard. And then what happens is that inside of the second shard, you store conditional state objects, and you have a process that kind of runs behind an epoch and resolves all of the conditional objects. But that's just a kind of very big category of ideas. And within that, there's the challenges of how to avoid exponential blowups, how to actually store state, how to just make the whole thing work sanely and in a reasonably simple and general way. So I've been still in kind of early stages of mentally trying to figure out the best model for this sort of thing. So like the general approach that I'm thinking about is that you can have state objects in one shard that store dependencies, and so you would have potentially multiple copies of a state object. And you would have some data structure that basically says this is the state object that kind of is most likely to be to turn out to be correct, and so this is the one that a transaction can work off of, and the rest of the objects are just there, and if in case the first one turns out not to work. And so what this gives you is the ability to do this kind of optimistic fast path, and it almost looks like you're getting actual state transitions cross shard within a couple of seconds, but then actually it's done on top of this thing where the kind of quote real state transitions only happen after a couple of minutes. And the challenge is basically just making making that whole thing kind of look maximal, just and feel maximally elegant to use and work with. So realistically, the way I see this happening is that there would be one contract that you could call a kind of hypervisor, and transactions might end up actually just being calls to the hypervisor. And then the hypervisor would kind of do logic that says that basically just manages these different state objects, and then the transaction itself would kind of have opinions about what carry opinions about what dependencies it thinks have been satisfied, and then based on that, the hypervisor figures out which contracts to modify, and you probably have to do a kind of internal sort of call capture thing where if one contract makes a call to another contract, that call itself gets sort of rerouted through the hypervisor, and the hypervisor figures out like which version of the contract it goes through. But basically the good news there is that it seems likely that all of this can be done on layer 2, which would be nice because then it becomes seamless to kind of upgrade hypervisors and try out different ones over time.
Great. Thank you. Another comment on the transfers. So I think the intention here is to launch with the max transfers per block constant at 0. And I'm actually in favor of, before phase 1, to coordinate a fork on enabling transfers, simply to kind of practice a hard fork with the forking mechanism, before we hard fork phase 1. But that's up for debate and discussion further down the line. Any questions about other research updates? Is there anyone from the Pegasus research team?
Yeah, I think they're having network troubles, so they can't participate.
Yeah. Okay. So next time, and maybe they'll leave us a text update. Any other research updates before we move on, or any questions about what was said?
Yes. So this is from BSc. This is more of an academic update, perhaps, rather than a research update, but perhaps it's also important. Just to mention that I have give a couple of classes on the last few weeks in a master that is focused on blockchain technology. And I more or less have explained the concept of sharding in Ethereum, and I have presented the simulator that runs in the supercomputer to the students, and so they have been playing with this simulator a little bit. So yeah, there is a little bit of academic dissemination on that side. Just another quick note, I met with Ken last weekend in New York, and we discussed about a couple of ideas on how to continue this project. Yeah, that would be all.
Great. Thank you, Leo. Okay, cool. Any other research before we move on? Great. Moving on to network updates and discussion. Felix is here. So actually, I was going to do let's do discovery first. Felix is here.
Yeah, nice. So I posted the link on the agenda to the call. So I think we have the Discovery v5 spec done for about 95%. So there are still some tiny things to figure out, but basically I think almost everything is come together now. I have a Go implementation of it. It's not as complete as the spec. So at some point it was ahead of the spec. Now it's behind again. I was sick this week, so I couldn't actually do anything. I'm guessing that we'll be able to actually, I don't know, yeah, like test it out in like 1-2 weeks time. So what we need right now on the Discovery v5 is just, extra eyes on the spec and just, to see if the crypto is okay. So we changed from the last update, which was I think 3 weeks ago on the call, changed quite a few things. So there was like it's encrypted now, so there's like a key agreement handshake, and some of the actual messages in the protocol have been simplified. And there's a lot more documentation in general, like about the protocol. So we have the spec is in 3 parts now. So we have the actual wire protocol spec, which is really short. So it's like 1,500 words approximately. Then we have a sort of theory document that explains how to implement it in terms of algorithms and data structures. And then we have a rationale document, but this one is outdated at the moment. So this probably like the next update to the specs probably going to be to just update the rationale to explain some of the design choices better. So this is where we are at the moment, and I'm actually really excited because because there's just not so much to do anymore in terms of figuring out some of the problems. So I guess the big next step is just going to be like, having it audited and seeing how the implementation behaves, and then, maybe having a second implementation to test against before we can like launch it.
Great. I was going to ask, would it be of value to have another implementation have a go at it yet, or maybe another?
Sure. I mean, at this point, yes, absolutely. So
Okay.
there's that. I mean, if anyone's interested and has time, I don't think it's like particularly complicated, especially if you already have like a v4 implementation, because most of like some of the data structures you can just reuse. There's definitely, we have a bit of an advantage in Go Ethereum because we've had, for the topic advertisement stuff, we basically already had the implementation from the 2-year-old prototype that we've actually been using for 2 years. So we kind of already know that, it's not obviously broken in those parts, but the wire protocol is like brand new. So it's that's actually where most of the work was just making the wire protocol work. So the actual data structure, I just used the same thing that we already had for the v4 and from the earlier prototype. So it's not changed all that much. In general, I just think it would be best if like some people, whoever is like really into networking, could just check out the spec and tell me if there's anything obviously wrong, or they think something's wrong, or maybe something needs like to be explained better. We already had one issue where someone asked for some clarification, so I think this is definitely the phase for this now, to just check it out, maybe see how easy it is to implement, and ask questions and so on.
Yeah, Felix, I'll do that. It's Antoine, and I'm in Berlin till tomorrow, so if you want to meet up, we could arrange something.
Oh, cool. Yeah, sure. So we can definitely meet up, like either today or like, I don't know. Just
let's do it offline.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. To reiterate, this is definitely one of the big, not a blocker, but just kind of one of these unknowns that we need to resolve. So if the networking person from your team can take a look at it and provide feedback as soon as possible, that would be awesome. And if somebody does want to take a whack at an implementation, let me and Felix know. Cool. Anything else, Felix, on your side?
No, thanks. Like nothing else yet.
All right, cool. Thank you. It's exciting. Great, and we have Raul from libp2p from Protocol Labs here today. Raul, do you want to give us an update on what's going on y'all's end?
Yeah, so one big change on our end, something that has been decided for a long time, is reconsolidating and basically pulling together all of the abstractions that make up libp2p into a single place, so that it's easy to reason about the system, to understand how things are wired together, and so on. This is taking place already in the Go implementation. We are basically deprecating around 15 repos, which is a number that I'm very happy about. And yeah, I posted a few links on the meeting agenda for today with a few with the forum discussion and the issues and so on, so you can participate, take a look at how it's shaping up in the branch where this work is taking place and so on, and just take a look around and poke around. That is the main update from my end, but I do also want to say that, and you've probably already seen this because I announced it in several places, that we have opened up our forums. They are now GA finally, so feel free to create an account there and start a discussion. I don't want to be a bottleneck for you guys to and the Ethereum community to interact with the P2P community. So let's bridge these two communities together and have a free flow of conversations there.
Great, thank you. I guess a moment just for the P2P discussion and questions in general. Anybody has any? And we do have a handful of notes from the session, and we can get those to you soon. Anyone? Lib P2P before we move on? Okay, well, yeah, use those forums, and maybe we'll have some stuff to talk about next week. Okay, Matt, do you have any updates on the Phase 0 networking protocols?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Cool. So there's a bag of updates that I have coming that I should have ready by like Tuesday of next week. So specifically, these are changes based on feedback for serialization, the contents of the gossip sub, or not gossip sub, but the like the block propagation APIs, and then a couple more that I'll aggregate from the notes. So you can expect those to be open on Tuesday and ready for discussion.
Thanks, Matt. Cool. So there were a couple of issues brought up on using SSZ as network serialization. Anybody who had authored one of those want to give just a brief on what's going on in that conversation? Specifically,
I mean, I can.
Yeah, cool,
I can
cool.
give an overview if you'd like, even though I didn't author
Yeah,
that.
please do.
Yeah. So the context for both of those issues was a discussion that we had around some of the limitations of using SSE for the network. So specifically, if you use SSE for the network, you need a predefined schema, which doesn't work for the RPC sort of request response wrappers that I defined as part of the networking specification. So that spawned Yannick's issue, which was basically to point that fact out and try and find ways using the existing SSE spec in order to make that work. And then that also spawned a discussion with Justin Drake and the folks responsible for creating the SSE spec to see if there were ways we could change it to make it work. And so the proposed changes were effectively the introduction of a union type, which unfortunately does not completely solve the problem. So it still adds functionality we might need later. So there are two pieces that are inside that pull request. There's the introduction of a null and the introduction of a union type, which will allow us to have richer data structures for structures that we do serialize using SSE. But for the actual like request response payloads, I'm just not going to use SSE and just use a sequence of bytes just because it's massively easier and expresses the data inside those request response wrapper objects simply enough without having to introduce big changes to the serialization. So that's the sort of story there.
Thank you for the briefing. Questions, comments about the path forward here, or these union types or anything?
Is there an issue or a PR that we can review or discuss on?
Yes. So I just shared 861 and 871 in the chat, which I believe are both related, and then I shared the PR related to the union type and null type in SSZ. So discussion can definitely happen there. And it looks like Matt is going to be releasing some of these updates next week, and so discussion can happen on that PR as well.
Correct.
Cool. And was 861, is that related? Is that the same issue?
Let me double check. 1 sec.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so that can be resolved.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Okay, any other thoughts on this particular issue before we move on? Does anybody feel strongly about this union type and null type being added?
A null would be nice, but it's not extremely important at this particular juncture. So, like, if there are any concerns at all about how the null is implemented, I say we table for now.
Okay, well, we can continue conversation in that PR. Okay, thanks everyone on that. Great, and then Whiteblock is reopening some of the Gossip Sub performance tests. Zach, do you have any updates on that?
No, I just started a new repo for it, and I just repurposed everything from our work last year with ETH research. I'm going to be writing out the test library and sharing it all in that repo, so feel free to check it out. Any feedback or collaboration on defining the test plan would be appreciated. But I'm gonna start. I already started on that this week. So
great. Can you share the repo, please?
Yeah, I added it to the Git for the call agenda.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
So I wanted to say that Zach and I have been in touch regarding supporting them for this, and I put him in touch as well with the lead developer of Gossip Sub, so we can help you refine that test plan and support you whenever you find roadblocks or whatever.
Thanks a lot, Earl. Appreciate it.
And here's is Gossip Sub used by anyone in production right now?
I'd have to check. I think yes. Let me circle back with the team and get back to you on that.
Okay, cool. It'd be good to maybe sync up with them and see if they have any metrics or insight.
Yeah, that would be sensible. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Cool. General spec discussion. I wanted to highlight. Okay, so we have this looming V06. I kind of want to get it out tomorrow because it has a number of testing updates that I'd like to get out. But there are a few things still pending, so we're debating on whether to wait on getting it out for next week. So I'm going to pull up a draft PR today. I'll take a look at the complexity and things going on and make a judgment call. So that to be released in the next 7 days. I wanted to highlight that before we release it, that although there are a number of changes, it's almost entirely bug fixes and simplifications. I believe that a lot of code, this is going to be simplifying and removing a lot of code and making a lot of things clearer. The testing coming along with it is also much simplified and better. So I just wanted to give you all an update on that before any other general discussion on the spec. I know, Terrence, you had a question earlier. Would you like to ask that here?
Yeah. So the problem that we're running into is we see there's 3 different type of scenario. So one scenario is that you could receive a bad block, and the bad block could just be a bad signature. And then we could receive a block that's from a fork chain. And then the third scenario is that we could receive a block that is from the canonical chain, right? So let's say if we receive a block that's bad, which has a bad signature, I think we should just drop that block, discard it. And then if we receive a block that's from a fork chain, we should probably save it and then update the attestations with the latest attestation targets, because that block could be the head sometime again. So because of that, we want to save it. And then if we receive a block from a canonical chain, we should just process it normally. Do you guys agree with this type of approach?
Yeah, that all sounds sane. When you are processing a block, I suppose it's either building on what you see as the head or not. But regardless of whether it's building on the head, if it's building on something that's in your block tree, you should certainly process it and see if it is the head and save it for later use. So I think we're definitely in agreement there. Bad blocks should be dropped. There could be attestations in a bad block that you would want to keep if you hadn't seen them before, but I would put that as an exceptional case that you wouldn't necessarily want to program for the time being.
So one question that I had was, let's say if we receive a block, but then it's from a different proposer, and let's say we ignore that block because it's from a different proposer, and later there's a reorg, and then the reorg causes a reshuffling, and then turns out that block is actually from the right proposer because of the shuffling. So what do we do in that case?
So the only way that say you have a block from an unexpected proposer, if it was built, if it's in your tree, you can still tell if it's a valid proposer. Say it built off something prior to the previous reshuffling, then that proposer would be valid in the context of the branch of the tree, and so you could always process it. There probably are some heuristics to employ here. I mean, the naive way is to just process it, put it into your block tree, and have it as a potential for the future. If you have a block that might cause some sort of it looks totally unexpected, it looks like it's on a branch that is not canonical, you always have a heuristic of attestations. So if you have a block come in and there's literally no attestations for it, and it's going to cause you to have to download a bunch of other blocks to figure out where it goes, or it's an unexpected proposer, there's definitely, if it's going to cause you to do undue work and there's no attestations for it, you might put it in a queue and deal with it later.
Mm-hmm. So can we define the bad block? It just means a bad signature. That's it. So right.
A bad block means in the context of the Python spec, it throws any of those assertions in the block processing.
I see. So if it throws any of those assertions, we just discard it. We don't save it, right?
Correct.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, that could be because it's a bad proposer signature. They included invalid attestations. Pretty much anything that they can include in the block could make it into a bad block.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool.
We have a queue, like a queue that we build up. Like as we sync, we build this queue and then we try and process the queue. So we have to do just like a little bit of extra logic on top of that to be like, should we discard it from the queue or should we leave it in the queue and try and process it later? So if it's like the case where we don't know its parent, but it's not necessarily invalid, then we keep it and maybe try and process it later. Same deal if it's from like a future slot that's like ever so slightly maybe the next slot or something like that. So that's just something that we've come across.
That makes sense.
We do the same thing in Nimbus. We have a block pool which run in a separate process. So during the block processing, if we receive a block with that we don't know about, we put it in that pool, and we have a separate process that just checks and asks the network, I don't know about this block, give me information. And if something is missing, because we are missing that block and a lot of block in the middle, we ask for all of those as well. We don't have heuristics to put it for later processing. It's just we have a process with the main state transition and another one for blocks that we don't know about.
So sounds like you have two parallel processes for that, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
That makes sense. Yeah, so you have a block come in. If you can't process it, you pass it along to something that tries to figure out the data it needs to process it, and then would pass it back if it can figure that out. Cool.
And we just have a little flag to flag the time that we got it, and then if it's been too long since we got it, then we just drop it, so we don't fill up RAM with crap.
Gotcha. Any other questions, spec, comments, and things you'll run into that might be worth sharing? Cool. Sorry, I just read Greg's comment. Okay. I guess we can move on from spec discussion. As always, hit up the getter, get in touch with me, or actually at this point, the clients, your co-clients can answer lots of questions because they're seeing a lot of these problems in the wild as well. Cool. So open discussion. Anything anyone wants to talk about?
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Johnny was talking about. This workshop we're going to do May 16th in New York. It's kind of in between consensus. I assume nobody here is going to that. And in between consensus and East New York. It's just the day in between. We'd love to have everybody come out. I think there's been like a decent amount of commitments from the various implementation teams. So we hope to see you there.
Yeah, I'll be there. Excited. And the topic again is road to interop. So test nets, testing, plans, project management, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, some of the agenda is still being drawn up, but that's kind of like the overarching theme, right? Is like getting from where we are now to actually having a test net or actually interoping in between our various clients. Yeah. So if anybody wants to add anything to the agenda, we'd love to have you add it,
I know from experience this is a bit easier said than done, but if there's a way for people to call in, that'd be great. Just so that because we're pretty far away, so it'd be cool if we could remote in.
We came down to see you guys. Come on.
Mate, the amount of times I've been to see you guys, it's not even.
So we'll do our absolute best to try and get that. I'm still kind of like working out some of the logistics on that, but yeah, we're gonna do our absolute best to get that.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Right, can I do a short note on testing?
Yep.
So for this week, I hope to finish the CI infrastructure. So we have the test from the test generators output to a new repository with GitLFS, supporting like large amounts of all these test outputs. And then starting from next week, I would like support from clients to start implementing test runners, the programs executing the tests and seeing if the clients match the expectations. And hopefully also see contributions back to the testing and see some new generators. So if anyone wants to like collaborate on that and start coding test generators, like message me and we'll get started starting from next Monday. Thanks.
Yeah, Diederik built out some cool general purpose tools for creating the generators, so should be relatively easy. And if we get a couple hands in there, we can iron out even more. Okay.
So for those interested, I guess we can go on the Ethereum 2.0 tests jitter to coordinate or say, okay, I want to work on SSZ or on whatever, I guess.
Yeah. Proto, you're in that getter, right?
Yes, I follow the Gitter and Discord as well.
Greg, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I'm using features in here. Did anyone start a discussion on validator to beacon chain RPC or well RPC or whatever we end up choosing? Did anyone start that discussion online? I know somebody from SIGP was going to do it.
I haven't seen it
Yeah.
yet. Yeah.
I think Luke was gonna do it, but he's just gone away. I'm not sure. I'll try and follow up with that, but I think he's out of reception.
Gotcha.
Okay. No
if
worries.
you can, Paul, do you have? I took a picture of what y'all had drawn up on the board. Do you have notes from that? If we can just do like a dump of the ideas from the session, that'd be good.
Can do.
Cool. Thank you. Anything else?
Actually, what's the Discord that Proto was referring to before?
Good question.
So there's this bridge from the Gitter chat to a Discord channel. So you can either chat in the Discord or on Gitter. It works. You get to see the messages anyway. Gitter is more used.
I thought it was a secret channel for like core testers.
There's this public Discord from the Ethereum Foundation with many other projects as well. And so there's this one public channel that bridges the Discord, the Gitter.
Yeah,
Nobody
cool, thanks.
use it, but I'm there if there's anyone that prefers Discord.
I'll stick with Gitter. I have enough chat apps. Thanks, though.
Too many chat apps.
Migrating to Discord from Gitter, is that on the table?
No.
Bit of a joke. I just like having search functionality.
Do not migrate to Discord. Okay, thanks, bye.
Actually, I discovered that Jitter has a search that is working. It's just strange in terms of ergonomy, but it works.
Cool. Johnny, you unmuted? Anything?
No, that was an accident. My
Alright,
bad.
cool. Okay, cool. I think we're going to close the meeting. It seems like now that we all have a ton of shit to do, these meetings are a little shorter. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll plan on meeting in 2 weeks. I'll send an invite soon. As always, hit us up in Gitter. Lots of stuff going on in the spec repo, and talk to y'all soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.